Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And we are continuing with looking at how culture plays a role in the work that we are doing as da'is. And if we do not have it under control, it can run out off the rails and end up ruining what we are trying to do. As well, it can ruin us. As well, it can also ruin our own deen. So, I said before the break, how many people, if I had to ask you at home, would raise your hands and say, are you ethical? Very few people would raise their hands. If I had to say, are you brilliant? How many people would raise their hands? If I had to say, are you beautiful? How many people would raise their hands? You see, our culture tells us that we are not allowed to accept this type of praise. We may be out of false modesty, maybe out of real modesty, but it changes from culture to culture. Perhaps if you ask the same questions to the Russians or the Germans, they'd be, yes, 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 no problem. If you had to ask the people in India that, even if it was true, they would go, can't raise my hand. It's not acceptable. It's rude. It's not the way to be. So much of our lives is dictated to by our culture. But one of the interesting things is we can never lie to our bodies. We might have a cultural perspective, but we can never lie to our bodies. Our bodies always know best. And this is why, even in Islam, we believe that our body parts will talk, body talk, on the day of judgment. Because our lips will say one thing, our body will say another. Our hands will speak what they did. Our fingers will speak. So these things are important to understand. So let's look at emotions, first of all. If all cultures are the same, let's start from an emotional perspective. What are emotions? Most of us assume that emotions are the same for everybody in the world, but they're not. Everybody's emotions are different. Understanding of what emotions are different. So if we look at Western or Eastern emotions, they're very different to one another. Those from the East and those from the West have very different understandings. If you look at the Portuguese and the Greek, for example, Portuguese, Greeks, to a certain extent the Italians, that's part of the world. You see that when they talk, it sounds like they're fighting with each other. They're very loud and very aggressive and very emotional and very expressive in the way they talk. But when you come to other countries, it's very hands held together, you know, reserved, very quiet. Very different way of expressing emotions and feelings. In many languages in the world, because the language itself is limited, it's required for you to do facial expressions and movements and body motions. Like you'll find in the Zulu culture, even the people are standing right next to each other in Africa, they'll be speaking very loud and very emotive. They're using lots of actions and shapes and forms. You'll find in the old, what they call the Bakwela and Vasquela, which we all know as Bushmen, they made all sorts of clicking sounds. But most of the time they were using shapes and forms of animals and giving descriptions because that was what required in their culture to communicate what they were actually saying. So psychology has been around for how long? Islam has been around for 1,400 plus years, and actually from the beginning of time, to be honest. It's not only 1,400 years. And I trust Islam more than I trust psychology. It's been around longer. It stood the test of time. What psychologists said, this is the way to analyze an issue, has changed so many times. In the beginning, they used to electrocute people, duck them under the water, force them into cages, put them in solitary confinement. Today, they supposedly moved forward. Now, instead of doing that, they just give you drugs. More or less do the same thing. So, if we have a look, Muslims have been more interested in medicine, the state of your mind, the state of your being, sciences, and how they influence the length of your life more than any other religion in the world or any other science in the world. Islam is about extending your life, how to live a better life. They have the cure for aging. Today I was at the Islamic Research Foundation, and there was one of the brothers who was 80 years old. He looks like he's 40. You walk in there like, what? We have the secret to life. Submit, hand your life over to Allah, perform your salah on time, fast during the month of Ramadan, and you'll see how well balanced, how rounded you become. So Plato was the first Western scholar to talk about emotions, what emotions are and what they do. And he believed that emotions are a mental process. that it's something that happens. Everything that happens is mental. This is Plato's understanding of emotion. William James, who is from Harvard University, he said that emotions are actually a physiological response to what is going on around you. So one says it's purely emotional, other one says it's a response to what's going on around you. People will get angry because they see something happen and then they have an emotional response. They feel sad and then they have an emotional because of what they see around them. Aristotle claimed that emotions are an interconnection with your thoughts and your actions. So there are three different definitions by the sciences, by the brains of the day, or the brains of our times that we look at. Now, Eastern beliefs often understand emotions and say that emotions are something that you have to experience. You have to get into, connect with your emotions and experiences. In a way, many times looked at as inseparable from the body and the mind. They are stuck together. Many Eastern philosophies. That's why you'll see that when these holy men, supposedly, will go and they will starve their bodies to get to a higher state of consciousness. Instead of starving their spirit, they starve their body. In the newspaper just the other day, in fact, on Sunday, in the newspaper, in the Indian Times, there was a big picture, and I wish I could show everybody at home. And it said, when I go, every time I plunge into the waters of the Ganges, I feel that I am becoming more spiritually connected. Every time I plunge more into the water, I feel myself becoming more spiritually connected. And when I saw that, I had to take a photograph of that to put on the internet, because it's sometimes exactly how people from the East may see something. They think somehow if you deprive your body, that you're somehow going to become spiritually connected, that you're going to have emotional maturity. That's how it is seen in Eastern cultures. So what is emotion, if we had to look at it? What is emotion? Well, emotion is different to different people, and the experience of feeling is what we often call emotion. So when a person prays to God, when he prays to Allah, there are two types of ways that he can do this. The first way, it is a calm and meditative prayer. That is like reciting. When you're reciting something. Many religions in the world, like the Catholics, Hindus, Krishna consciousness movement, they do recitation. So it's a calming and meditative prayer, a recitation. And then you have interactive and repentant, which is the second type of prayer. I want to change and I want to learn from Allah. I want to learn from God. These are the two ways. So we have to understand, even the understanding from our emotional perspective of prayer may differ. So we have to find out how they are seeing it from their cultural perspective. So what is the right way? It's both. But some cultures from east to west will separate and have it very different. One will just be repetitive, and I don't even know why I'm doing it. It just becomes a mantra with no thought behind it. And then you have another culture which is, it becomes very interactive and very repentant, and it's almost hard without any emotions involved in it. It just becomes painful sometimes. It's a combination of both. There has to be an element of doing it because it's good for your body, and it is sometimes you're disconnecting, because this is why when we finish our salah, we come back to earth and we say assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. We are greeting people because we've gone. There should be that experience. It shouldn't just be the sciences of salah. It should also be emotion combined, but it mustn't be to the exclusion of either. So beware when you're talking to people, just because they are praying 5 times a day doesn't mean they're understanding it. From their cultural perspective, you have to understand how they are seeing it. So it's very, very important, even here at home, that you don't just do things without thinking why you're doing them. So don't exclude this spiritual aspect and only do the physical aspect. Both of them need to come together when we talk about something simple as how to